Welcome, Aman. Good, good.
So we are live on both platforms.
Hi, Neil.
Hi.
Okay.
No, I just wanted to check. Either my sound is very loud, and I just wanted to check maybe just tone it a little bit down, but it's not a
Okay.
problem for the background. Straight.
So just let me know if it's better now.
Yeah. Welcome, Aman.
I think it's on mute, maybe. I'm not hearing any audio from the clip. Is that correct?
$500, 600 meters away from the beach. So maybe, Aman, when I was a student at this campus, we used to go take lectures at the beach at the restaurant. And the owners used to say, bring your strips if you have passed, and then you get a free beverage, to quote Sheldon. So so we have a very wonderful ecosystem here, something we have to protect, and one of the men charged with that at the university, specifically on the social engagement, is Prof. Zulu. Prof, welcome to the conversation.
Thank you very much, Neil, for having me. Unlike Aman, I'm not a pure scientist. I'm a political scientist. I grew up in a rural village in KwaZulu-Natal, which is one of the 9 provinces here in South Africa. And it's one of the areas in the deep rural areas of KwaZulu-Natal. And apartheid made sure that development did not happen in that place. And unfortunately, under the new political dispensation, development has also not been what we expected it to be. It's very, very slow, to the extent that we still don't have running water, even though there are reservoirs. There are no pipes, and those reservoirs are empty. This is the reality of the place where I come from. In a nutshell, the job that I'm currently doing, and I'm enjoying it because I'm able to touch base with my former colleagues in other institutions, and I'm also able to forge relations with external stakeholders. So that will be it for now.
Thanks, Prof. So Prof has basically stayed close to the coastal cities wherever he's gone in the world. So he's close to the sea and all of the goodness that the provinces bring in KZN. Thanks, Prof, for that. Very insightful journey. I also know another very prominent Professor Masisi Kunene from that area, who just happens to, his family honored him with a program, and the school that he went to a few years ago couldn't get past 30% matric pass. And this matric results they've been working over for the last number of years got their first 100% pass rate. So amazing what you can do in villages around the world, and we're very pleased to have that. So we're back to the podcast on Afrocentric perspectives on systems change, and the conversation continues. Thank you, Prof and Aman, for your backgrounds. Aman, maybe just to give context to why this particular conversation, introduction, your background in marine ecology, and how these things fit in at a societal level. Maybe if you could just give us a brief synopsis of the origin of systems change and why this initiative at this time.
Thank you, Neil. In our lives, I think, as we grow up, we're not conscious about it, but we come across and in contact with various systems. Yeah? And I think early in childhood, when we go through our learning process, the first that kind of comes in contact outside our family home is the educational system. Yeah? And I spoke about my own experience and journey in the marine environment, for example. Like for me, when I immersed myself, literally diving into tropical seas and oceans to do the work that I was doing in terms of research, taking students in field trips, and doing all that work, you clearly come across something that's not a single experience. There's a totality of things that are coming together that gives you that experience that we call a system. Yeah, and I think systems change has been for the most has been there in traditional knowledge systems and communities, if you think about time immemorial. But in the most recent understanding of the field itself, going back the last few years, you're looking at the work that folks have been doing in the area of social systems, for example. Yeah. Someone like Peter Senge and Otto Scharmer and others have written extensively about systems change in trying to help us understand how change happens in society. But for me, I think that dive that I did, for example, in 1988 off the waters of Mauritius with African scientists and some Australian scientists to study coral reef systems there. Clearly, when you're in the system, your experience is coming from various components of the system. But as I was saying earlier on, it's not singular experiences that you're having, it's a collective one. And that's why, really for us, in the context of the work that we're doing, it's very important to really understand systems change. There is no definition and description that brings everybody on the same page what systems change is, but by the way that the system manifests itself. For example, when we talk about education or housing or criminal justice system or any of these systems, the way that the systems manifest themselves in the lives of our children, youth, and families, that you start understanding, what the system might be or might look like. The problem is, like, you cannot pinpoint your finger into an aspect of the system systems change in the global north from a Eurocentric perspective, that someone like me who has been doing this for so many years and, learning a lot closely and, from Peter Senge and Otto Scharmer and Glenda and others, it's time for us to really start thinking, if we were to bring Afrocentricity close to systems change, will it be different? The assumption that we're having going into this is indeed it will. Why? Because, there are principles and value systems that guide the behavior of systems that are different for people of African descent. And so for me, when you look at systems change, from the work that I have been involved and my colleagues and I are now involved, we're education, housing, health, mental health, all these systems, the way that they manifest in either influencing negatively or positively our people, they need to be understood. Because what we're trying to do is in our work, and we'll talk more about this, is we're responding in singular ways. We're not responding to the collective behavior of the system and how the system actually shapes the impact on our community. So part of my excitement in this series that we're launching in collaboration with friends in South Africa is to really give us the opportunity to delve a little bit deeper in understanding systems change, systems transformation. The other word is systems transformation from an Afrocentric lens. So I'm excited about that, but I don't pretend here sitting that my version of understanding systems change or systems transformation is the version that everybody should go through or accept.
Sure.
This is the opportunity to learn.
Thanks, Aman. Thanks for that. I guess it's probably more relevant to have a more localized example of that. Prof, you sit in an institution who's named after one of the most transformational world leaders, called Nelson Mandela. And I guess the question, given what Aman has alluded to, is the universality and the inclusiveness of the systemic experience for people. What are for you the kind of examples, when we talk about higher education transformation, what does that mean to this legacy of effecting transformative systems change? Just if you want to zero in on one area that is of particular relevance to this campus, maybe share those with us.
No, thank you very much, Neil, and thanks to Aman, because from a broader perspective, I would say that systems change is something that happens almost on a daily basis. It's just that sometimes we're not conscious of the changes that are happening until somebody comes to spell it out for us, and then we say, oh, this is what we're doing before, and this is what we're doing now. Then we understand it much better. So having said that, I think that this institution where I'm based in is quite unique in a number of ways, because it is the only one that is named after Nelson Mandela. And in fact, we have a huge responsibility because Nelson Mandela had many identities. One, you look at him as a traditional leader, and then you look at him as a politician, and you look at him as a lawyer, you look at him as a diplomat, you look at him. So there are many identities that he, in fact, he reflected in all his doings, whether he was the president of the country or the president of the African National Congress. There are a number of identities that he held. Now, in the context of this university, one of the things that we've tried to do, because initially it was called Nelson Mandela Metropolitan University. Then later on, there was a decision taken that no, we just need to call it Nelson Mandela University. So that at least we link it directly with the man and not necessarily with the metro where it is based. One of the challenges that the university has been dealing with and is still dealing with is that of a transformation. And in fact, coincidentally, earlier today, I received a message saying that we are going to have phase 2, which looks at transformation in its broader context, but also transformation in the context of this university. This is one of the burning issues where we need to embrace systems change, because what normally happens is that if you have an institution operating under the old order, that is under the apartheid regime, there were certain things that were characteristic features of that system, and then universities were understood in that context. The moment you have a transition from apartheid to a democratic dispensation meant that you had to change the way you...
Before we head into the actual program, is that something you have with you now, or should we come back to that before I start with the formalities?
No, it's just that I have another meeting after this. I indicated that I'll make my inputs, then I'll stay for about 10-15 minutes, then I'll have to exit and go to the other meeting.
Thank you, sir. So,
but then if you want me to just do the, but if you want me to just do the word of welcome, I'm happy to do that. Then I can share the document with colleagues later.
No, we don't want you to run away. Your insight is so invaluable that I do want you to remain here as long as possible. I'm going to say to all attendees, we will take Prof's introductory remarks before he has to leave. And then we will introduce the rest of the program and the speakers. And Prof, apologies for pausing you there. And we thank you for being part of this session, although you have short time. Please continue.
Okay, thank you very much, my sister. Yeah, then I was saying that if you look at the work of the Kemites and the Nubians in Egypt, they do, in fact, authenticate what I've been saying, that Africans have made a great contribution to global civilization. In the era of Industrial Revolution, Europe owes its existence to Africa. And this was confirmed by a number of scholars, including Eric Williams in his book, Capitalism and Slavery. In the era of governance, countries like Ghana, Mali, and Songhai played a critical role in ensuring that Africans were properly governed. They also collected taxes, which taxes were used to further develop their countries. So which means then the story that has been, the narrative that has been carried forward, saying that Africans know nothing about governance until the arrival of colonialism, are in fact incorrect. And then in the area of health, Africans were able to cure a number of ailments to the extent that they could even perform C-section using their own traditional ways. So it doesn't mean that a C-section only came with the West, where after colonialism. In the area of agriculture, Africans also diversified their agricultural outputs, which they used not just for their own subsistence, but also to trade with other countries, which then takes me to the other point on trade. Africans first traded within the continent in what was called the trans-Saharan trade, and then later on they traded with the Middle East and of course Asia to prove that in fact they were internationals in their way. In the area of education, Africans excelled in science, mathematics, and geometry. This is confirmed by the pyramids that you find in Egypt and other places in North and West Africa, which then confirms that this has been the case. Even in terms of university education, a number of universities in Africa predate those found in Europe, in countries like Italy and also Britain. And this is confirmed by a number of scholars. My book in 2012 confirms that. Other books by Ashby in 1964, 1974, they confirm all of this. And then in the era of religion, as I come towards the end, Africans had their own religious systems. And then, of course, when the Europeans came, they pitted Africans against each other by introducing different religious systems. You are a Catholic, you are a Presbyterian, you are this and that. Then Africans were divided. When in fact, even though they were divided before, but then they were tolerant of one another. And then these Western religions further divided them and then caused enmity, some of which have come to cause a number of wars within the African continent, which we call religious wars. It's as a result of that. And then lastly, Africa was deliberately weakened by the West through slavery and colonialism. And this has been confirmed by authors like Walter Rodney, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, which confirms that Africans would have developed further if it wasn't for slavery and colonialism. Therefore, on the basis of this, my conclusion is that Africa has played a role in the global community, but the way the continent is being recognized is not the correct one. Unfortunately, some of our African leaders in the academic field and the political field have colluded with our Westerners in the continued oppression of the African people. Therefore, it means that Africans, both those who are residing within the African continent and those who are in the diaspora, have to join hands and do things differently. because we cannot outsource agency, given the fact that those who started this whole thing are not repentant as things stand, and therefore the onus is on us. With these few words then, colleagues, thank you very much for this session, Neil for coordinating all the events, and then of course our Canadian colleagues through NABC. We really appreciate this. The African continent must resurrect itself, otherwise nobody else is going to do the job on its behalf. The change system is the good place for us to start, because then we are going to do things differently, both the way we think and the way we do things, and then we can hope for a better future. Thank you very much, colleagues.
The way we think and the way we do things, aligning a psyche alongside the action outcomes to resurrect Africa is what I heard you say, Prof. Becky. Thank you for that wonderful introductory remarks. That brings us to the welcome for everyone to this inaugural dialogue. In a series of dialogues that's going to come up, I'm Nazreen Ibrahim. Thank you for joining us this evening. We have a whole host of organizations that have provided this space for us to be able to speak. Personally, to introduce myself, I also work in artificial intelligence ethics. So listening to Prof speak around what it means to define ourselves as Africans is a necessary component of talking around the topic on ethics. Now, what is this dialogue about? Well, it's first in a series of dialogues on systems change for transformation, as you heard Prof mention. The first, which is the one that you're now attending, Unpacking Leadership Approaches Necessary for Systems Transformation, Afrocentric Perspectives, Lessons, and Practice. It will follow in other conversations that will come about some of those topics that we'll be exploring: youth at the forefront of systems change and philanthropy towards systems change. This dialogue is brought about by a partnership between the Canadian Partner Network for the Advancement of Black Communities, Nelson Mandela University, CS Business Innovations, and the Center for the Advancement of Non-Racialism and Democracy. So I'm thrilled that you're all able to attend this afternoon. We have varying sections in today's dialogue. What is a dialogue without a little bit of this and a little bit of that? To add more flavor to what we want to learn and understand about one another. Part one, introductions and the keynote address. We'll then go into village conversations, and we've got interesting guests lined up for that one, who I'll mention shortly. We'll end or round up with discussions that take place in breakaway rooms. You will have facilitators. Those breakaway rooms, as is happening, as it is on Zoom, you will be familiar. It takes a little bit of time as you get in and out of those rooms, so don't be alarmed if you are a little late to the plenary when you're coming back to have a report back. Your facilitators from the session will provide a report back so that we can round up and provide action items. Some of the speakers that you will listen to today, Aman Meles, Prof. Becky, who you have heard already, he is here with us for a short time. Kizito Musavimana, Dr. Sitsetsa Pilani, there are a few others who I will make mention of shortly. I hope that you are going to take away today a deeper understanding of psyche, of who we are as humans. We're so immersed by all pervasive artificial intelligence. And I mention that because it's leading a great debate, race, and varying ideologies on what it means to be a human being, what it means to be an African, what it means to be a digital citizen in the world. But we are kicking off this first inaugural in the conversation. I'll go back to the program here. Some house rules to remember. You can drop comments in the comment section. They will be picked up by the excellent backend team that we have. We started out, of course, with a podcast that you were listening to as we got into the session that gives contextual understanding and gave an introduction to some of our guests today around what this session means today. So, as I have said to you, dialogue wants to bring about understanding the long-standing systemic challenges confronting people of African descent in Canada and worldwide. This cannot be addressed without tackling their underlying causes. As we seek solutions to address the systemic and generational challenges that face Black communities, and I would say people of color in general, it is critical that we recognize that effective solutions extend beyond individual efforts. Collaborative approaches involving diverse stakeholders, drawing upon collective wisdom, so note keywords here, collective wisdom, experiences and knowledge, are essential to navigating our deepest challenges. And our partners certainly hope that this is what. Now, I want to go to our first guest who come up to talk to us. We had Prof. Becky speak to us. You heard him on the podcast speak to our other very good friend, Mr. Alan Basab Aman Meles, and I'm just going to go to his bio here. Aman Meles, Executive Director of NABC with 30 plus years in non-profit management, including roles at United Way, Toronto, and Kazi. He chairs the Institute of Change Leaders, leveraging his background in marine ecology to bring a unique approach to community development. Please help me to welcome Aman Meles.
Thanks, my sister Nazreen. I'm so delighted to join this inaugural dialogue with our sisters and brothers who's in Canada and in the continent and elsewhere. This is a very important step in the work that the Network for the Advancement of Black Communities, and I'm joining here today with several of my colleagues. And I wanted to pause and acknowledge the leadership of Alan Bosak in terms of curating, facilitating, and cultivating, if you want, the land, so to speak, or the soil needed to reach where we are today. And I also wanted to acknowledge and thank our partners in South Africa, CS Innovation, that has played a pivotal role here in also working with our colleagues here to make this happen. I want to acknowledge the partnership that we have forged with CANRAD at the Nelson Mandela University. And most importantly, I also wanted to acknowledge the role of the Ontario Trillium Foundation, an innovative, long-standing foundation here in Canada that has gone to places that many other foundations have not done. And we have partnered with the Ontario Trillium Foundation to bring this to you. And we have a long history of relating to them and learning from them. I joined you from Toronto, and Toronto is the largest Canadian city here. Is the traditional territory of many nations, Inuit and First Nations, and it has been since time immemorial the place of convergence for many nations, including for us people of African descent who have come here in this country generations past as newcomers in the last 40, 50, 60 years. But also it's a place where our Afro-Nova Scotian brothers and sisters have made home more than 400 years ago. So there's a long history of African presence here in Canada, just beyond the immigration and settlement pattern that many of you might be familiar with. And so Toronto is guided by Treaty 13, and I want to pause and acknowledge as a treaty person that this is important for us to share with you in terms of our presence here on the land. The Network for the Advancement of Black Communities as a systems transformation organization nationally in scope for the last 5 years plus now has been working with many in Black communities across the country to create the conditions for change, the conditions for real difficult conversations about why people of African descent in this country are on the margins of Canada, and why the socioeconomic on education and health and employment, income security, poverty, and so on, are not really trending well for our communities. I think in the work that we're doing, we say that it takes a village to raise solutions for Black communities in this country. And then the reason that we're embarking in this process now, in this dialogue, is that we recognize that Afrocentricity and Afrocentric values and knowledge systems, the African ways of knowing, transcend Canada. They are global in nature, they are in the continent, and they are in the global Black diaspora. And it's an intentional approach to try to really go there, to try to learn from others in terms of really informing our practice and knowledge systems. The Network for the Advancement of Black Communities works with all levels of government, philanthropy, Black community actors and allies to really, create those opportunities for addressing some of these challenges that we're facing in an intentional way. We feel like we're planting the seeds. we might not be there to see all the changes that we would like to see for Black communities in this country. But in what we're learning from indigenous community, at least let's think about 1 or more generations, if we count 7 generations. Yeah. So I'm excited to be in dialogue and listening from the panelists today. In the work that we're doing, we recognize that change happens when we start shifting the mindsets. When you start having, open conversations about leadership and what leading means. And with that, in a year where 2024 marks kind of the decade of people of African descent, and an extension here within Canada of the decade of people of African descent to 2028, but also the launch of the permanent forum of people of African descent at the UN and globally, the work that is happening across frontiers in the continent, the African Union, the regional bodies, in the Caribbean and elsewhere, we have a unique opportunity, I feel, to connect the dots. And so I'm really eager to listen and learn today. And I'm so excited that we have reached this day. This is the beginning of intentional learning, but learning that leads us to action. So I'll pass it back to you, my sister, and I'm looking forward to the dialogue today. Thank you.
Aman, thank you so much for that. I will call on you once more, call on your generosity and kindness to assist me with doing an introduction for our special guest on the call, Liz Forsberg, who I know is the partnership lead Impact Ontario Trillium Foundation. Just to tell us a few words about who Liz is, and then Liz, we'd invite you to join us on the call.
Foundation is a cherished relationship, and Liz is the director of the partnership and investment there at Ontario Trillium Foundation. I'll be able to say a little bit more, but they are learning partners. In the work that we do, we feel that we must be partners in solution with funders, and the Ontario Trillium Foundation for us is one example of that type of funder. So Liz, looking forward to listen to you, and thanks for your partnership and support for this endeavor.
Thank you so much for the warm welcome, Emmanuel and Nazarene. Really, really pleased to be able to join you today. I am also joining from Toronto, or Treaty 13 territory. It's also what is known as Dish with One Spoon territory, which was an agreement between the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe to peacefully share and care for all of the land around the Great Lakes. And I, as Emmanuel said, I am a partnerships lead at the Ontario Trillium Foundation, and we're an agency of the Government of Ontario, an arm's length agency, although sometimes it doesn't feel that way. And our mission is to build healthy and vibrant communities across Ontario, and we do that by investing in community-based initiatives and strengthening the impact of the nonprofit sector in Ontario. We do this through a combination of grants through our Community Investments Program and our Youth Opportunities Fund program, as well as partnerships, which is the space that I work in. There's just a small team of 6 of us who do this. And our partnerships program collaborates and co-invests with others to build a healthier and more equitable nonprofit sector. We really want to make sure that the sector has what it needs to anticipate, adapt, and meet the changing needs of communities here in Ontario. And we do this partnership work from a lens of systems change. And we know, the dominant narrative in the systems change landscape in Canada really draws heavily on Eurocentric approaches and thought. And for B3 organizations that are leading this work, these practices and approaches often lack cultural relevancy. And so we're excited that this convening series is going to bring together systems change leaders from B3 organizations in Canada, alongside leaders in Africa, to tap into the wisdom and innovative approaches of practitioners and thought leaders from an Afrocentric perspective. And on behalf of OTF, I want to express how grateful we are to learn alongside you And we're so grateful for the leadership role that NABC plays for advancing really critical conversations in the community sector across Canada. You do such innovative work, and we're so happy to be able to collaborate with you. Thanks again for the opportunity to be here today.
Liz, it's wonderful to have you on the call. Before you go away, we'd like to talk to you a little bit more around the investment that you made into the dialogue series, which is wonderful. It brings people together to talk around the central theme that's now been chosen for the series of dialogues, which is systems change. When you immediately hear the word systems change, what for you as a personally comes into your mind? What's the first thing you hear? Just so that we plant a seed for the conversation that's happening in part 2.
The tough questions. I guess I think about in systems change, it's being able to understand a broader ecosystem around an issue and the way that the power, resources, and information circulates around an issue. Being able to see it from a broad range of lenses and perspectives, and understanding how as a system we need to better work together and coordinate to be able to address an issues.
Issues, and certainly, and thank you for being such a good sport and taking the question on the spot like that. I know it's planted a seed for the conversations coming up in the Village Conversations, which is in part 2. So thank you for your generosity. Much appreciated.
My pleasure.
Liz Forsberg is speaking to us, introduced by the ever gracious Aman Melis. Liz, of course, partnership lead, Impact Ontario Trillium Foundation. Thank you for your generous support of this dialogue series. You heard Aman there speak around what it means for us to change psyche. Now, before we go to our 5-minute break, we need to be further enticed into the rest of the session. So we're going to take a look at something very interesting. We will do a 5-minute break, and then when we get back, we will look at part 2, which are Village Conversations. Joining me in that session are some very interesting and special individuals who have the pleasure of listening to, and so will you. Our speakers include Alfred Opio, Dr. Sensetsa Pilani, Kizito Musevimana, and Nerissa Nkonyeni. And I'm really thrilled that you have an opportunity to listen to their wonderful stories. So let's take a look at what we have to see at this moment.
I am an African. I owe my being to the hills and the valleys, the mountains and the glades, the rivers, the deserts, the trees, the flowers, the seas, and the ever-changing seasons that define the face of our native land. My body has frozen in our frosts and in our latter-day snows. It has thawed in the warmth of our sunshine and melted in the heat of the midday sun. The crack and the rumble of the summer thunders, lashed by startling lightning, have been a cause both of trembling and of hope. The fragrances of nature have been as pleasant to us as the sight of the wild blooms of the citizens of the veldt. The dramatic shapes of the Drakensberg, the soil-colored waters of the Likwa, Iqili, Lotugek, and the sands of the Kalahari have all been panels of the set on the natural stage on which we act out the foolish deeds of the theater of the day. At times, and in fear, I have wondered whether I should concede equal citizenship of our country to the leopard and the lion, the elephant and the springbok, the hyena, the black mamba, and the pestilential mosquito. A human presence among all of these, a feature on the face of our native land just defined, I know that none dare challenge me when I say I am an African. I am the grandchild of the warrior men and women that incense the Kukuni land. Patriots at Tetwayo and Mpepu took to battle. The soldiers Mushweshwe and Ngumunyane taught never to dishonor the cause of freedom. I am the child of Nongause. I am he who made it possible to trade in the world markets in diamonds, in gold, in the same food for which our stomachs yearn. Being part of all of these people, and in the knowledge that none dares contest that assertion, I shall claim that I'm an African. Today, it feels good to be an African.
Behold, man's ancient call was a step to reality. Behold, the ancestors wish that a day
Welcome back, everybody. I hope you've enjoyed your break. We had a bit of a 5 minutes timeout. You saw a beautiful poem there by a previous President of the Republic of South Africa, Mr. Thabo Mbeki, talk about the beauty and the sustenance, the spirituality of the land, of the people, of the space, of the elements. And I think that is what will inform our conversation in where we explore identity, perception, and the energy with which we present as an Afrocentric dialogue and ongoing conversation. Thank you for joining this inaugural dialogue on systems change brought to you by various partners. I just want to announce our partners once again and thank them for their participation in the session and the space that they've created for us. Canadian Partner Network for the Advancement of Black Communities, Nelson Mandela University, CS Business Innovations, the Center for Advancement of Non-Racialism and Democracy, CANRAD. And of course, we heard from Liz Forsberg, Ontario Trillium Foundation. And thanks everyone for joining us. Now, let's get into the second part of our session. It's around an hour. And what is this session? Part 2, Village Conversations. We will talk about each participant here will share their story with us. We will then go into a roundtable discussion where we explore different elements of their personal, but also professional contributions to what systems change can be articulated around, how it can be defined. The main central key theme is leadership. What does leadership mean to you? And this is what we're going to explore shortly. So I have heard from the team that we have three we've got 3 of the panelists here online at the moment. Nadisa Nkunieni, Dr. Sinsetsa Pilani, and Kizito. Kizito, I must get your surname correct, so I'm going to go to my bio here, Musavimana. Kizito Musavimana is the founder of the Rwandan Canadian Healing Center, addressing PTSD in the community. He's a lead activist advocate for African migrants in the GTA and played a key role in the African Canadian Affordable Housing Village Initiative. Kizito's advocacy focuses on storytelling and cross-sector collaboration stemming from his personal battle with PTSD after the 1994 Rwandan genocide. I know we are online, but it doesn't stop us from rousing a wonderful welcome for Kizito. So please help me to welcome him to the panel and to the stage. Next up, Dr. Sinsetsa Pilani, an educator with 30 plus years experience, focuses on youth programming, emphasizing empowerment and inclusivity. As Equity, Diversity and Inclusion Strategy Lead at Boys and Girls Club, Big Brothers Big Sister Society of Edmonton, she's committed to social justice and poverty eradication. Her upbringing in apartheid era South Africa shapes her dedication to inclusive education and community betterment. So please help me to welcome onto stage Dr. Sinsetsa. I know you have the emojis that you can use under the reactions. So I would love to see some of the applause emojis coming up, thumbs up, hearts, all of them. I now see that Zoom has introduced, if you wave your hand, if you've set it on your settings, it will actually identify the gesture, and then it will give a thumbs up or something like that, which is scary and cool at the same time. All right, let's go on with introducing our wonderful panelists. And Nadisa Nkunieni, an expert in African system strategy, specializes in developing transformative curricula across sectors like civil society, international development. She previously directed initiatives at Bertha House, promoting activism and inclusivity in Cape Town. Nadisa also led the systems portfolio at the University of Cape Town's Bertha Center, enhancing African perspectives in global discussions. Please help me to welcome Nadisa to the stage. And can I have everybody up on screen and see your cameras if you are around? I'd love to greet you and see where you are. I don't see you on the screen. But we'll start with Nadisa. Nadisa, thank you for joining us. A pleasure to have you here. What are you expecting from today's dialogue in this conversation we're going to have?
Hi, Nazarene. Thank you. Aha, I'm just trying to start my video. Thank you for the welcome. What I'm expecting from this dialogue is I'm really looking forward actually to hear from my contemporaries and peers in this work. Systems work from an Afrocentric lens can be quite lonely, even doing it on the continent. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to hearing and learning from others who are doing the same work.
Can be quite lonely. Can I make a note of that? We're going to have talking points later on in the conversation. And I want to understand the concept of it being lonely and what is the case study for that. And that's such an incredible point that you raised. So thank you very much for that. I appreciate you being one of our valued voices on the panel today. We've got Kizito. I see you, brother. Thank you for joining us on the panel. What are you expecting from the dialogue today?
I like to call myself a student of life, and so just hoping to learn.
We're in the same WhatsApp group. We are in the same WhatsApp group.
Okay, that's amazing. I definitely looking for learning about different system change approaches from different areas. I would like to say that I was moved by the video that was just shared. Unfortunately, this is the first time I'm hearing our dear brother and former president of South Africa, and that hits me. I'm a sucker for poems, so that was beautiful to hear. And I love that was played, and love to share more about journeys of how we all arrive here, but also to learn more about how others have arrived here. I know for sure that if it's not for the Afro system or the Afrocentric values, I wouldn't be here speaking to you. So I owe my life to the history, to the contribution of African giants, and so I'm looking forward to this.
To African giants, we always succeed because we're standing on the shoulders of a giant who was courageous enough to go before us. And so that's another interesting talking point about the giants that we look forward to following, or who have laid the groundwork on the African continent in the context of systems change through leadership. Dr. Sensetsa, I see you on camera. I'm glad that you are not having a challenge with the technical. Thank you very much for joining us on the panel today. What are you expecting from the dialogue?
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to be with people who are thinking about justice for our people. I'm just thrilled that we get to have these conversations about how we move ourselves forward, because nobody's going to move us forward. We have to, it has to start with us. So being able to talk with my brothers and sisters about how we think is very exciting, because sometimes, like Lisa said, it gets lonely when you are not at home, when your ways of being and doing don't really fit within the environment that you are working with. You can say something so many times, but it still doesn't make sense to people. And it takes such a long time. It's like an uphill battle to try to make a change in an environment where nobody shares your values or nobody understands. Even though you're speaking, phonetically the same language, nobody still doesn't understand what you're trying to get at, because the depth of the values that you bring is not shared. So I'm hoping we can start sharing some of the deep, rich philosophies that have made us a resilient people.
The depth of the values that you share, I'm going to read what you bring, are not shared or not heard, not understood, is what I hear you saying. You echo Nadisa's point about loneliness. So I'm hearing a common theme there, and we will pick that up later on in the dialogue. And thank you very much for being a valued member of our invaluable voice, at least on our panel. Now, you've heard from 3 of our panelists. The person who's missing here is Alfred Opeo, consultant and industrial engineer who founded Kano Africa, an EdTech solution for literacy in Africa. He was named Uganda's World Literacy Ambassador. His work won international recognition, including the UNICEF Innovation Fund Challenge. He established early childhood development centers and trains African entrepreneurs to enhance education continent-wide. So it took an opportunity that he saw to take a personal cause that he believes in deeply and turn that into an entrepreneurial opportunity, which is wonderful. Alfred isn't here at the moment, and we are looking forward to him joining. I understand that he has been traveling. So let us kick the conversation off with the 3 valuable voices that we have, in addition to every single one of you who are valuable voices on this call. The way we will do this as we are moving through the program, we've of course had the introduction of the Village Conversations participants. You've heard their bios. What we want to do is understand each person's story. We have an hour. We've spent 10 minutes getting to know our participants. They're going to take us through their thinking and their story, what came from a personal point of view into a professional realm, and then we will have a bit of a discussion. So I'm going to kick off with, I think on my program here, Nadisa Nkonyeni. You will take us through thought leadership, strengthening local and global capacity for systems change. Please be aware, if you have joined the session now, we are talking systems change, a focus on leadership. Nadisa, are you ready for us?
I am. 10 minutes, 15 minutes. I need these parameters. I could talk forever, and I don't want to do it.
All right, this is why you have us. So 15 minutes, we're good. We will flag you at the 10-minute mark. I will call your name at the 15-minute mark. I'll send smoke signals. I'll do a whole lot of things, but we will get you at the 15-minute mark. On that note, you will be leading us in a thinking and thought process around thought leadership, strengthening local and global capacity for systems change. We will then go on to our brother Kizito, our sister Dr. Sensetsa, and we will continue in that vein. Any comments, please drop them in the comment section. And thank you again for joining us. Nadisa, over to you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so I mean, I come to this platform, I come to this conversation as someone who has taught systems thinking and teaches systems thinking on the continent, from South Africa. That is to say, and I mean, this is for the benefit of many of you who don't know me. So that is to say, I have convened systems change and social impact courses from UCT's Graduate School of Business. So that's kind of pitched at an executive MBA level, MPhil, graduate classes. I also, teach on the Oxford EMBA, systems change, an elective on African inclusive innovation. And other such things, other types of learning journeys like that. So that's one level of what earns me the privilege of sitting here and speaking to you today. The other piece, where there's the teaching side, the other piece is around diffusing systems thinking from where I am. I'm beaming in from Cape Town, South Africa. With organizations, with collectives, with departments of like public sector departments. I have been part of global faculty based in South Africa, Canada, and Stockholm, where we work specifically with public sector officials in the SADC region, diffusing systems change frameworks and tools. It's important that I share that with you, and it's important, but it's important that we preoccupy ourselves with familiarizing ourselves with these frameworks of systems change and systems thinking. The reason why is, and it was eloquently put by Prof. Becky earlier on, in the mention of that beautiful book. Well, it's not beautiful, but it's an elegant and smart book by Walter Rodney, how Europe underdeveloped Africa. The reason why it behooves us to preoccupy ourselves and familiarize ourselves with these frameworks is because, for me, I see in them an opportunity for us to disentangle ourselves from the very oppressive, the very toxic systems that we currently live under, and very resilient systems that we currently live under as a legacy of the systems that came before. So, from a South African perspective, apartheid, and before that, colonialism, and that's kind of where I get my passion and my momentum for doing this work with the people that we do it with. The more of us who are familiar with these frameworks, the better we become at identifying the dynamics of these toxic systems that we struggle under, and the better we become at navigating these toxic systems and transforming them, changing them, so that we can start to diffuse more just outcomes. That's what systems change is effectively means. It effectively means taking the system that we're working in and nudging at it, tweaking at it, so that it can become a better version of the type of systems we want to live under. As part of my story, I'd like to share how I came to this work. My formal introduction to systems change work was at the business school, graduate school of business. And I was really, I think, fortunate to project manage a global systems change program. So what that was is that it was working with, high to middle managers within the World Bank and bringing them into the room, bringing grassroots founders in India, bringing them into the room. So bringing in a cohort of development practitioners who are trying to bring about systemic change in their systems, and assisting them with these frameworks, sharing these frameworks with them so that they could apply them in their work. And I was really fortunate to then be develop my understanding of systems change frameworks under the tutelage of some of the I think greatest contributors and thought leaders in the space, some of whom came from Canada. Some of you might recognize the name Francis Wesley, some of whom came from Stockholm Resilience Center. Some of you may recognize the name Per Olsen, and some of whom came from the African continent. Some of you may recognize the name John Goom, based in Accra, Ghana. The thing that struck me about that was that I was like, these frameworks that are being taught at such a high level, there's nothing new to them. I was immediately able to identify seeing those frameworks at play if I looked back to my upbringing in the Eastern Cape. I grew up in Umtata. Some of you may know that Umtata was the capital city of a homeland, the Transkei, which in and of itself was created by, again, a toxic resilience system, the apartheid system, in order to deflect attention away from how oppressive they were being. This notwithstanding, growing up in that context, so that's the shadow side of Umtata. The light side of it, if I can put it that way, was that it placed me in a place where, in a context where there was a concerted effort towards Black advancement, right? Nested in, again, as I say, a very toxic system, but a concerted effort to try and change that toxic resilience system from inside the community that I grew up with. I own that some will have a very different, a very different experience of Umtata, but that was my experience. So when, oh gosh, excuse me, I'm so sorry. Let me just decline that call. Sorry about that. So when I was introduced to all of these different frameworks, about systems change, transformation, sustainability, resilience, panarchy, Three Horizons, all of these frameworks, I was immediately able to create and see case studies that I had kind of grown up in. And moving from that point, so that's the point from which I then proceeded to, when I got to a stage where I could now start to teach the frameworks, that's the point from which I and my colleagues started to teach those frameworks, moving from this assumption that many of us who have grown up in oppressive systems have consciously or probably unconsciously already been applying systems change principle. So what that meant is that from inside the Graduate School of Business, myself and my co-conspirators, I call them co-conspirators, but what we immediately pushed for was exactly this: recognizing the Afrocentric or centering the African voice in systems change work, because just because we hadn't written the frameworks, because a lot of those frameworks, and a lot of them were coming from our global North partners, just because we hadn't written those frameworks doesn't mean that we hadn't lived the practice. So a lot of those years at the Graduate School of Business were very much about bringing the Black and the brown, or the centering the African voice in systems change teaching and systems change work, and centering the African voice as equals. So not just as not just as beneficiaries of these frameworks, but like content generators. At the same time, what we were doing is that we were starting to build partnerships with other practitioners, inviting them into the space, sharing the frameworks with them, inviting them to self-identify into those frameworks, and building partnerships with them that would, over time, start to decenter the Eurocentric kind of voice in systems change. Now, it's very important to Wonderful, thank you. The one thing I'll say that in working to decenter the Eurocentric voice, what we found is that we necessarily had to work with, it was slow, lonely work, but we had to recognize that it's not work that we could do just as Black and brown voices, but it was work that we had to do across the different positionalities, different levels of power, different races. And I mean, I think this is an important thing to kind of realize and know when you do the systems work, is that you never actually, and this is what systems leadership is for me, you never have the what is the word, the luxury to do it with just the people that you like. You'd never have the luxury to do it with just the people who agree with you. To an earlier point that was made. And what's required in systems leadership is not just the competencies of the frameworks, but certain sensibilities. So this is part of the reason why I'm really looking forward to hearing some of my colleagues speak to like the values, some of them speaking to the storytelling, because that's where we find the sensibilities. And by sensibilities, I talk about things like empathy, humility, surrender. These are not words that we necessarily associate with leadership, but in order to work in systems, these are what we found we had to start to put into place as we started to move towards a more Afrocentric systems toolkit, as it were. I know I'm running out of time, so perhaps I just want to talk about some of the lessons that we have been cultivating in towards an Afrocentric, and the recognition and the centering of an Afrocentric voice in systems work, which is something that's not, we still need to we're still working at it. So the first one is that the frameworks themselves, yes, they are necessary, right? But they are not the end all and be all. They are necessary insofar as they start to, and that's what we saw, they start to surface pre-existing knowledge, and you build on the pre-existing knowledge that we have already around systems work. Linked to that, the second thing is that as Africans, it's a generalization that I'm going to put forward, but it holds up. As Africans, a lot of and I know Africans are not a monolith, but a lot of our cultures, traditionally, we are more collectivist. Now, systems work speaks to collectivizing. Systems work speaks to diversifying the voices in the space. Systems work speaks to partnering differently and in order to find a sustainable way through. So that's the second thing that, it is a bias on my part, but I keep seeing it. It feels like Afrocentrism is actually better positioned to do the systems leadership and the systems work than a Eurocentric posture. That said, we need to do the work together. The other thing is that we found, and I mean, yeah, I can go into particular cases where we try to really, but yeah, I appreciate that there won't be time around that. But a very important lesson that I think is important for Afrocentric systems work on the globe. A toxic, resilient system has the resources to push back any innovation, any necessary and needed innovation like that. So what you find is that, and I think this was mentioned earlier as well, what you'll find is that you may be working to decenter a Eurocentric system, right? For the good of all, not just Africans. But what you find that you might find, and what we sometimes would find, is that the resistance might come from an African voice, right? And or you might find that it's a beautiful systems change intervention that you've got in place, but it doesn't quite take seed. The lesson is that toxic systems have the resources, resilient systems have the resources. In their resilience, they have involuntary mechanisms to push back at any type of systems change. And what is really, really important to get to that systems change is to work in mechanisms where you nudge and you iterate and you pay attention to what is changing. You nudge, you iterate, you pay attention to what is changing. And finally, not one person can hold the intention of a systems change. It needs to be a shared intention.
It needs to be a shared intention, is what you are ending off that particular point with, Melissa. Is that something you want us to remember right now? It needs to be a shared intention. Shared intention. Yes. Thank you so much for that valuable last 15 minutes, where you gave us insight into your perspective, both from a professional cause going into a personal cause, going into a professional environment, to have a shared intention. I think this is what you want to promote now. I must acknowledge Alfred Appiah, who's joined us on the call. I have read his extremely impressive bio out to you. Alfred, how are you doing? And thank you for joining us on the panel today. I appreciate you taking the time to be with us. What are you expecting from the panel today before we jump to our next two panelists?
I don't know if you can hear me loud, but
brilliant. You're all good.
Sure. I'm just struggling to hear you, but first of all, apologies for getting on late, because
all good. No worries.
My colleagues Alan and Neil know that I'm in transit. I'm on my way to Paris, so yes. I've just found a place where I can sit briefly and then deliver this wonderful message to my wonderful people and share this. So please bear with me in case maybe people pass around or some noise. There's not much I can do. This is the best that I can get. But I jumped in halfway. But it looks like today's engagement is really awesome. I'm expecting to hear a lot on systems change, which is something that I'd always wanted to speak about or write about, but I'd never gotten the opportunity. I think today is a great moment for us to share between ourselves, most especially from experience. I'm really eager to hear a lot about people's experiences in terms of being at the forefront, fighting on systems change. Yeah.
Alfred, thank you so much. Just to get an indication from you, you are in transit. How much time do you have with us currently, so I know where to place you? And I graciously ask Dr. Sensetsa and Kibitsa to indulge me while I ask you this.
I have an hour.
Okay, brilliant stuff. So we have 15 minutes per person. That's 30 minutes. We come to you. What if I shift everyone around slightly and I ask her for a lot of very humble permission to do this? Either Kizito or Sinthetsa is going to give you their spot so that you can talk to us, and you need to, as they say in Afrikaans, bukkel, get going on the road. So which of you kind people on the panel will like to give your session?
I can yield my spot right now.
Same
Brilliant.
here.
Thank you both, good, kind hearts. Alfred, I will take Kizito. We'll go to you and we'll come to Dr. Sinthetsa last. So just queuing you up. Now, while the presentation was going on by Lisa, thank you so much for that once again. I requested from Kizito and Dr. Sinthetsa to give us a 30-second insight into what they took away from Nedisa's address and her personal story. Kizito, I'll start with you. 30 seconds.
So for me, I think it's the key word for me is decentering Eurocentric or Euro voices in our work. And this is something we all deal with. It doesn't matter whether you're on the continent or you're here in the West, in the Western world. A lot of us are dealing with this through the education systems and everywhere you look, including our religious systems and so forth. So that work for me is where we have to start. And I'm reminded when she shared that particular insight, I was reminded of the folks like Teofilo Benga and Dr. Shekanta Diop first when they were dealing with UNESCO and trying to prove some of our records or history that Africans contributed in ancient Egypt and so forth, and the fight they had to go through just to prove that these folks were indeed Africans. So it's everywhere. It's in everything that we do. You have anytime you have a little bit of success, it's assumed it's because you've learned it from a Eurocentric background, or you've had a Eurocentric background, and it's also assumed that you have to have that form of education. And sometimes that's what kind of hurts us, because a lot of the time you have African bodies with a European brain, and hence why I would say we still have a lot of work to do on the continent to actually have real independence. But that's what I would say.
Is it a story of our lives, but does it need to be the rest of our novel? No. So this is what we want to tackle here. Dr. Sinthetsa, 30 seconds from you, if we can.
A lot resonated. Like, for instance, we operate within what now is called systems change. That has been our tradition of doing traditional ways of doing things. So that resonated with me. I just remember some things that I did from my early childhood, when I finished my first degree and was teaching. Some of the things, the ways I approached my teaching in high school was something that I learned from home, that my colleagues who were of Western origin just were amazed at, because I wanted to remove the inequities about my students actually understanding science in my science classes. And even the way that I operate here in the work that I do, I bring in the knowledge that I learned from home. I bring in Ubuntu to dealing with equity, diversity, and inclusion as part of the foundation for what I'm doing. So there's just so much. We don't delineate the ways we do things in the language of systems change, but right now we have a different language that we can share with the whole world and say, look, this is why things work for us, have worked for centuries for us within our systems. We know we have been disadvantaged because of the force of, whatever came to Africa and separated us and broke us apart. But our processes were evolving in a systemic way where we had the collective in mind all the time.
And I really love that phrase you used. You phrased it correctly, the language of systems change. When you think of the way you use the term language, you can use it to refer to how something is used, how you are presenting on something, the actual of it, the noun, which is, this is what we're going to use to communicate. Reminds me of a panel that I moderated at the Global AI Summit in Riyadh 2 years ago. And on the stage were women from all around the world. All were white, So the Eurocentric voice was strong. I was a person of color from the African continent. And the reason I'm sharing this small story with you, this small insight with you, is because, and we had an Arabic audience. So obviously, Arabian audience, Middle Eastern. And we were very particular about the fact that the main language was Arabic, but English was a chosen form of communication. And those words that we used to describe the effects of AI bias, whether it was discrimination or whatever other terms we used, and I'll bring it up shortly, had to be demonstrated in that moment. Because you can take a word in a language and it can have a male or female connotation or a derivative, and therefore many others. So I love that you used the word language of systems change. It can be named in so many other ways. More fabulous to see is that the two of you took away things that will add even more depth to the conversation. So Nadisa, thank you for inspiring that in Kizito and Dr. Setsa. Alfred, I'm not going to ask you at this stage. I know you joined halfway. We won't put you on the spot like that, but we will go to now Kizito's presentation. You know the drill, Kizito. We have 15 minutes. I will start sending the brigade with the 15-minute timer once your time is up. And the same will apply for then the rest of the panelists. Dr. Setsa, you will go first, followed by Alfred, then Nadisa. I would like 30 seconds from you on your takeaways from Kizito's address. And please, as the audience, drop your comments and thoughts in the chat box. I will attend to them as soon as we are done with the session. Your time starts now.
Again, I want to say thank you to you, to the folks that are organizing this, the Afrocentric group and NABC and definitely the BO Ontario Trillium for organizing this. I think we get caught up in the forest in the work that we do, that we don't actually get to remember how we got here or the approaches that we take to do this. I personally think I've landed into this system change by accident. Maybe I'll share a little bit about how I got into this, but it was really kind of taking a few years to after I survived suicide, because I went through a period of time when I was considering suicide, and after that I took 3 years to really map out my life and to understand, like, if you are not going to kill yourself, then you got to do something and actually do something that means something to the world. So obviously, born in Rwanda, raised in Rwanda, and I lived through the genocide against the Tutsis in 1994 in Rwanda. Left Rwanda when I was 13 years old, came to Canada in 2000, have been here ever since. But the life, the sort of expectation of what I was coming to, the land of milk and honey, didn't turn out to be the case for me. Struggled throughout my young adulthood. Went to, college, film school, studied film and wanted to tell stories about, actually one of my first project was to tell a story about General Romeo Dallaire, who was the head of the UN during the genocide. He was the head of the peacekeepers. We were doing a commemoration 2 days ago, and somebody mentioned that UN is only in Africa, or whatever UN goes, they are only there to keep peace. They are not there to create peace. And that again hit me, because that's really what they do. If the peace is gone, they run away. So Romeo Dallaire was one of those folks that I was trying to understand and to do a documentary about. And through that, I actually come to realize that I was suffering through the same challenges that he had, which was PTSD. So between 2009 and 2012, I was like every day just trying to find a way to kill myself. What saved me, and why I share this story, what saved me is what I shared with earlier, was the giants and the history of Africa. I wanted to understand my people. I just by accident fell on a video on YouTube that was talking about the history. This is Dick Gregory, for those of you who know Dick Gregory, a comedian, Black American comedian who once ran for president. Incredible brother, passed away a few years ago. And so from that, he was doing an opening for Bob Marley in Zimbabwe. I believe 70 something. I don't remember the year, but I just kind of discovered that video, and from that I was like, wow, this, because sometimes you don't actually know who are the giants. If you're not in that bubble, you don't know that they exist. So from that, I discovered the Black community, what we call the conscious community. I did a lot of research, read a lot of books. We talk about folks like Ben Yakanan, Dr. Ben Yakanan, John Henry Clark, Williams, Dr. Chancellor Williams, who has done a lot of work on African history and basically trying to rediscover our steps. And so through that, I was able to actually start tracing my roots back to the continent. So it had been almost 20 years since I had left the continent. I had promised never to go back to Africa for obvious reasons. You live through a genocide, and then you go to Kenya. I was in Kenya for 4 years, and every day or every other week, the police officers would arrest us because we had no IDs. So it's like you had nowhere to go on the continent as an African. You didn't feel like you had a brother to protect you, even on in Kenya. Of course, all of that has now changed as I have grown into my true self as an adult, that I understand it's bigger than just what I had experienced in Kenya. But I had promised the continent is just something I'm not gonna have a relationship with ever again. And then through this research, through this journey, tracing those roots and going through some of the work that our African giants have done throughout history, that I was able to go back to the continent, and I discovered people like Sheikh Anta Diop, Teofilo Benga. Of course, I talked about the other folks that I read on, and that allowed me to even start thinking about going back to my own country. Looking at my own people. Going back to Rwanda. Of course, a few years later, this is around 2016, towards the winter, when I was doing, when I had fully recovered. You never actually do recover from mental health and trauma. You kind of just find a way to cope and live with it. For me, I've used it as a fuel, as a gift. But once I had found that particular area of purpose for me, I made it my mission to serve my people. And I do believe that my purpose in this world is to tell successful African stories, beginning with the African Canadian stories. But of course, in our community, sometimes you have to help build and create those stories. And that's what we're doing. The work that we're doing at the Rwandan Canadian Healing Center is not just finding those stories, it's helping to develop and create those stories. So whether it's in the work that we've been doing with our first initial project that we launched as an organization in 2019, which is called Ali Kebland, where we're looking to actually work with young people to rediscover their purpose and find out, and we're trying to do that through learnings, that some of the journey that I took to understand the history of our people, but understand themselves. And of course, the other project being the village, the African Canadian Affordable Housing Village initiative that we are doing, looking to develop villages here in Canada. And of course, some of the advocacy work that we're doing to support the African migrants and newcomers. We have done all these in that process to be able to not just think about what's happening today and what our folks are dealing with today, but also how do our children in 50 years, in 200 years, how do they cope as a result of the work that we put in? And so that's, for me, what guides me. And I was talking about how I took time to create my personal vision. And now what I look at and realize was actually systems change. It took me 3 years to look at different work that have been done. For example, one of the people that I wholeheartedly follow, and at one point I considered myself one of them, is Moz. So the Moorish legacy. We're talking about people who who went into Europe and conquered Europe for almost 1,000 years, a millennia. These are folks that are West Africans, Black Moors. Most people think they were all Arabs. Arabs came into the mix a little bit later. These folks have done so much to carry forward some of that legacy that the Africans in Egypt had left behind. Of course, talking about people like the Dogons that carried the same message through their story sharing. Those are the folks that I was learning from and trying to figure out what is it that they did that allowed them to lead as long as they did. Of course, not everything they did was wonderful. Some of the things they did wasn't something that we want to practice in the future. But there is a lot of good that came from the work of the Moors. And I think Western society wouldn't exist as is without that work. So I think for me, going into that and thinking about how do we do this? How do we bring communities together? How do we do something collectively, making sure that it's here to stay? I believe I've said this before, and I do believe it. And this is not my my thinking. It's the thinking of my spiritual mentor. His name is Sifri Manel. Basically, the way we are to think about community development and system change is you have to first understand, if you're going to build something that's going to last 1,000 years, you are supposed to think 10,000 years in the past. If you're going to build something that's going to last 2,000 years, you get the same thing, to 20,000 years in the past, and understand what happened in history. Understand not just your people, but understand the entire society. So I think that's what we all have to do, not just understand our history as Africans. We also have to understand other societies, other communities, and where they're coming from. The thing I love about the African history is that no matter where you look, you find us there. If you go to the South, in the Americas, before you have Europeans, you had Africans here. If you go to Asia, you find Africans there. If you go to places like Hawaii, you find Africans there. You go to Europe, the same thing as I just shared. So we have an influence across the world. And I think what we need to do, just maybe to start, and this is why we started our initiative with the Ali Keblan project, is to remind our young people and those of us that are still young enough to contribute that we have everything we need. We have everything we need to lead. And I do believe that the world is not going to align itself if the Africans are not taking a seat at the table and actually contributing as leaders, not followers. We cannot follow, my belief is that we cannot follow a European system, because since Europeans have been leading, we've not advanced morally, we've advanced economically, we've advanced in terms of the development. But part of that is coming back from what we put forward from the African systems. So I think we have to be at the table. We have to lead in order for this world to see peace, in order for this world to see harmony. And until then, we are going to continue to kind of move around and wonder why we're chasing our tail. So I do, so I just wanted to share a little bit about that. But in terms of talking about my finding home through others and the changing the system through people and relationship, I understand, and I stand on shoulders of folks that did this better than I would ever. My senior, my dad, who passed away right after I left Rwanda in 1997, was a hero of mine. And I learned this as I got older. He was just good at bringing the village together. My dad was a judge. But beyond that, my dad was like, we didn't have kings in my village, but if we did have the kings, he was that, because everybody came to him. I remember one time when one of our neighbor was giving birth and they were having trouble. His wife was having trouble giving birth, and they came to my house. My dad was not a doctor, but they came to my house and they're like, we need your help. So obviously, I'm the 10th of 11 children. So my dad had experience in helping to deliver children. But yeah, he ran and they were able to deliver that baby. I also remember another incident, and this is before pre-1994 genocide against the Tutsis, where an elder had been beaten and you know, kind of left a lot of mess, and my dad had to take some of his clothes and went and cleaned him up. And this is when you are a child and you see something like that, it embeds something in you that you know that you are supposed to serve, no matter what your position is, whether you're a judge or just a farmer. And so it took me a while to learn how to follow that particular path that my father had laid ahead for us. But I think that's what I'm getting into now. How do we bring people together? How do we be the conduit for people's skills, knowledge, talent? How do we create an environment? How do we provide a space for people to actually be themselves? So whether it's through building these stories, which is what I believe to be my purpose, to build and tell these stories, or whether it's to just create an environment for these young folks, the people that are going to be that are the future of our world, to actually be themselves, giving them the tools, whether it's books or just simply the space to flourish. I've been doing my best to bring that to the forefront, but it's not like anything. You cannot achieve anything on your own. You need a village of elders. Unfortunately for my community, the Rwandan community, there isn't that many elders. Obviously, a lot of them were killed. We went through a terrible time, but that's where you extend to others. When I talk about, for example, my spiritual mentor, C. Manel, I never met this brother, but I have watched every one of his sessions. I have watched about maybe 1,000 hours of his sessions. And later on, I actually found out that we were born on the same birthday. So there you go. But so it's finding other teachers. Of course, one of my elder here, Brother Emmanuel Melis, is one of my teachers in the community. If not for him, I wouldn't even know that what I've been practicing was a system change. So that's why I say
to honor your teachers is not only such a spiritual thing, it's also, well, I'll speak from an Islamic perspective, but we are taught to honor our teachers. And the story you talked about your teachers is reminding me of, I had desired to go to Mauritania in the last year. I didn't even know previously I wanted to go there, but I did. And it's only because one of my spiritual teachers has studied there for an extended amount of time. But having landed there, I felt the sense of the spirituality of the place and the sense of learning. To me, be amongst learned people who come from a place of historic wisdom is what we have as a superpower, I would say. So thank you for reminding us about that. You have reached the end of your 15 minutes, but we have so much more to talk about in the round table. Everyone knows the drill. We go around for 30 seconds. We get your feedback on what the presenter talked around. There are two comments in the comment section. If I may take them, please, quickly, I will share with you what some of our attendees are saying. We will do the commentary and feedback from our valued panelists, and we will go to a break. Sound good? Okay, let's do it. So let's do the comments first before we go to Dr. Sensetsa, Melissa, and Alfred. Zamani Ra says to everyone, this conference has been so validating for me. I appreciate all of the information and messages people are bringing to the call. I appreciate what you are saying so much. I run a non-profit based on African-centered principles in the climate change space. And I'm so happy I maintain that stance in all that we do. Keep up the great work you are all doing. I'm experiencing our joy in this moment. That's pretty great feedback. Thank you for the love, Zamani Ra, and we send it right back. The Afrocentric lens, this is Sir Aman has offered us some thoughts of his. The Afrocentric lens is a people of African descent lens that so much is grounded in Africa and also inclusive of the global Black diaspora. That is why the UN Permanent Forum of People of African Descent is such a useful platform for enriching Afrocentricity everywhere. Chengetai Chikadaya, this is such a refreshing, connecting conversation. For a moment, we can step out of the manufactured world. I'm going to say TikTok world, Cheng. This is how it feels at this moment, especially with the US wanting to ban it at this point. Conversation for another day, and step into an environment where we can all feel like builders of our own realities, bring our truths and experiences to the fore. Afrocentrism is definitely about sharing and conversing and honoring mentors and teachers. And I thank you all for your commentary. It is so much appreciated. Dr. Sensetsa, thoughts around Kizito's invaluable insight?
You know what I learned, and something that I really value, is the sense of identity. And knowing your lineage, learning the people that you learned from, the people who make you who you are. That's something that came out very strong from what you said, and staying connected and being open to learning from other people. I think that's one thing that we all try to do, to expand our knowledge, our ways of being, because we know that we belong together.
I love that. Knowledge and ways of being open to learning. A woman once, complete stranger on a flight, said to me, it's important that you have a teachable spirit. I was much younger, so probably naive or dumb enough not to really understand it. But now at this older age, it has really hit me. So what you are saying hits me. Nelisa.
Thank you. To that, I will add, Gizito, there was you said, how do future children cope as a result of what we're doing now? And that just reminded me of one of the key elements of systems change work, which is this. If we're trying to build, we can only build as far into the future as far as we are willing to go back into the past. And all of your work is a beautiful, for me, a beautiful embodiment of that principle. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Just to everyone else, can you indicate if you can hear me clearly and at an audible volume? Okay, great stuff. I'm getting some feedback that my audio is not so great, so I'm trying to resolve that. But while I do that, and I'm glad that all of you can hear me, Alfred, I'm going to come to you. Alfred, you are somewhere on the screen. Mr. Alfred up here. Where are you, sir? Feedback on Kizito's insights, both from a personal and professional perspective. If you are still there and you can hear us, please indicate so, or we will go to a quick break. If I can just get a sense from the team. Alfred, you're around. There you are. If you just unmute and give us 30 seconds of your feedback on Kizito's presentation. Alfred, you can hear us. Just indicate if you can hear us. I feel like we may have lost some connection there. There might be a pause in that or a lag. Alfred, we'll try you once more. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I was off. My network was off, but I am now on.
No problem. Yeah, please go on.
Sure.
I wanted to get your 30-second insight into what you took away from Kizito's presentation.
Sorry, Nazrin, I didn't get what you said. Pardon me.
I'm sure thing. I know you're in a noisy environment, so I'm going to try once more. We wanted a 30-second feedback from you on Kizito's presentation. Once we get that, we'll go to a short break. So I would love to take your insights before we do.
Okay. I didn't catch most of it, but the whole introduction of getting to that almost committing suicide point, and then having to rethink about how to set things right. For me, that's the number one thing that caught my attention. And from there, I start to see that a lot of youth could be also still going through the same thing. But how do we address this? How do we bring them closer and make them realize that there's a lot more in the future? There's a lot more. Or there are so many people you can speak to and then make a collective change. I think that's the one thing that really caught my attention.
Alfred, I appreciate you taking the time. I know you're in a difficult environment to navigate an online call, but it is so much appreciated, your feedback, really. Thank you very much. I have been in transit and done calls while trying to get passport control to stamp my passport. Worst nightmare ever. They thought I was trying to get through by other means. So we have one more comment on the comment section. We'll do that and go to a 5-minute break. Orville Burke, that was an amazing and engaging perspective and life story. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your journey with us and allowing us to reconnect with our own past. Know that you have definitely carried forward the legacy of your father, my brother, Kizito. You have indeed touched many people to understanding what tragedy has brought in the form of successfully going forward to inspire others. On that note, we will end part 2, village conversations, for now. Not the session itself, but just the presentations that we've had. Alfred is the last on the list, but we do need a 5-minute break. I'm sure you all do. So we will go to a 5-minute break and we will be back. Thank you so much.
Et si je te dis que je t'aime, tu dois me répondre que tu m'aimes. C'est tellement simple. Son plan est déjà
Apologies if we put everyone on hold for a little longer than the 5 minutes that we went away for. I hope you're back. If you're joining us from the break, welcome to our inaugural dialogue in this series around systems, Afrocentric approach to systems change. We're focusing on leadership today. You are in part 2, which is the village conversation. Let me remind you of our wonderful guests that we have on the panel. I just want to go to my notes quickly. Alfred Opeo, Dr. Sinsetsa Pilani, Kizito Musavimana, and Medisa Nkunyeni. You know the drill. We had presentations by our esteemed panelists, and then feedback from the panelists on what they heard the colleague talk about prior. Alfred is in transit, so we are going to go straight to Alfred. He will have 15 minutes. Thereafter, we will round up the presentations with Dr. Sinsetsa Pilani, and then come back for a more in-depth discussion, picking up on the notes that we've heard and feedback through all the various presentations. Alfred, are you ready to go? Alfred's just moved away from the screen. I see that. So, and I know when you're on the move, someone's going to get your attention, or you need to get going if you need to get going to the airport. So I'm going to play this by ear or by screen, seeing that we are on screen, and see whether Alfred will be back right now. He is not back, so I'm there he is now. Alfred, are you okay?
Please pardon me. I was just trying to find a way that my neighbors can kind of reduce on the break, but we can push on.
No, it's all brilliant. Don't worry. We actually don't hear any background noise.
Yeah, please let me know when to start.
No, we are ready for you, actually. You are up for presentation now. I know that you are having trouble sometimes with audio, but from what I understand, you will be talking to us about the practice beyond servitude, liberating access to education. So take us through, you've got 15 minutes, which will take us to 6 p.m. here in South Africa. But tell us how much of time you have, and then we will go to comments. Thanks. And over to you.
And I know, Nazreen, you are very good at timekeeping. So let me start right away. Yeah. So anyway, thank you for this opportunity, getting me here so I can be able to share these things that I've always wanted to share with the world. This is a good platform for me to share the things that have been paining me from childhood until today. So, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Alfred Opio, and I'm the founder and CEO at Kano Africa, where we are leading the ECD, or Early Childhood Education Development in Africa for children. And we have developed solutions that are capable of teaching children how to read and write in just 1 month. But I'm also an independent consultant with a ULEAD that is under TCDC in Tanzania, which is under the Danida Fellowship from Denmark. My expertise there range from innovation, entrepreneurship, and then how to apply SDGs, for youth in their interventions. Wow. So, like you mentioned, the topic for us is beyond servitude, liberating access to education. This is a very important topic to me. But of course, I had to do a little bit of more research so that I can combine it with what I have. And I'll put it in, because the time is not enough, I really want to expound on this for almost the whole day, but we do not have the whole day. So for me, the number one importance of this topic to me would be economic mobility. You know, I feel like we need to raise an Africa whereby there is great economic mobility, which is going to be boosted by education. And I will explain this kind of education later, not just the current education we're having for the systems, but we all know that education is a primary driver for economic mobility, right? You know, we believe that once we have African children or youth skilled, okay, and knowledgeable, then of course they will be able to have higher paying jobs. I'll share a certain research that was done by the World Bank to show you how important this is. Another thing for me is social equality. One of the things that are breaking issues here in Africa, social equality is the problem because of the difference in levels of education. Because we know for sure that education plays a crucial role in leveling the playing field, right? Somebody who has got good education and somebody from a rural place or a low-income household, once they have the same kind of education, we feel like socially they will be equal. The third thing for me would be global competitiveness. You know, for Africa to compete at a global level, we need an Africa that is well educated. And I mean, not just going to school and sitting exams and passing, but becoming skilled. To me, as Alfred, that means being able to apply the knowledge that you have attained through school, and that is skills acquisition. Okay, because we feel like if we look on a broader scale, countries with higher education levels tend to be more competitive globally, you know. Okay, I would look at another thing as personal empowerment. As an African youth, we feel like education empowers individuals by providing them with certain tools that can make them be able to make informed decisions in any discussion, even like this one, you know, engage in critical thinking and also pursue their interests at a full and maximum potential, right? The other thing I feel is the cultural enrichment of the African youth, you know. If we have Africans moving to Canada or to the UK or to the US and things like that, education, if we can increase the access to quality education for Africans, we feel like this will help to preserve our cultural identity as Africans, you know, and the diversity at the same time, while promoting mutual respect and understanding among different cultures from Africa, you know. The other thing for me would be technological and innovative progress. If we can get better educated Africans or youth and children, and I'm talking about quality education. And when I mention quality education, I mean skills, the ability to apply skills. This is very important for me, and I'm going to speak more later during this thing. So the rapid pace of the technology advancement in the world today, you know, is making it difficult for people who are not exposed to education. My second last would be sustainable development. We all know what the SDGs are, the UN SDGs. This is an agenda for the whole world, for us to be in a better place. So for African youth or us as Africans to be a part of these SDGs, there has to be a certain level of education so that we can understand and also apply these SDGs. So I feel like education is the key goal in the UN SDGs application. And I would like to say lastly is the political stability and civic engagement. You know, we see so many coups happening here in Africa and so many things to do with bad governance, but educated populations in Africa are more likely to participate in democratic processes and also have the critical thinking skills which are necessary for political engagement. Now, that's just how important this topic is. But I would like to draw your attention to a few things. So, for example, did you know that 50% of the future jobs, and this I'm quoting from a World Bank report, you know, did you know that 50% of the future jobs do not exist as of today? You know, that thing got me thinking. And what does this mean? How do you tell me that half of the jobs globally in the future do not exist today? And the report further shows that these jobs are not going to be based on qualifications of the human beings. No, these jobs are going to be based on skill set. So that means we have an Africa that needs more skilled people to prepare them and make them better placed for these future jobs. Now, the report also shows that if we don't do something about this kind of education, then Africa alone, the African youth in the future are going to have a potential loss of over 10 trillion US dollars if nothing is done. These youth in the future are going to lose over 10 trillion US dollars. This is equal to 10% of the global GDP. Now, for me, that is a disaster, okay? I want to give a certain context to servitude, because my topic is around servitude, or what I really understand by this. But to me, I think servitude is more of getting somebody better prepared to be, how do I put it, to be in a place where they are at the mercy of someone else, or maybe being used by someone else. I mean, we can share thoughts around this, but that's what it is. And we need now to look beyond this, because we are saying, let's look at things beyond servitude, liberating access to education. Okay. I'll just give a historical perspective to this, because as an educationist, I discovered that our current education curriculum in Africa was not designed for Africans. This is something that was designed for someone else. And then this has been designed not for skill acquisition, but to serve our masters. And this is what I'm thinking. And it totally needs an overhaul, like what we've done with our current curricula here at Kano Africa. Now, the UN report indicates that in sub-Saharan Africa, only 1 out of every 10 children can read with comprehension by the age of 10. Yet, we have attained our all-high of 99% enrollment in schools, which sounds good, okay? Another report shows that 9 out of 10 children cannot read a complete sentence even after completing their primary schools. Now, this is something so sick. Children are in school, yes, but they're not learning. So we came up with Kano Africa, which, if I had enough time, I would have loved to share this, but I'll talk about this briefly. So going through school myself, I was one of those A-class
Is it me, or have we lost Alfred? Alfred? We've lost Alfred. I see.
was the days got a government, you know. But when I came out of school, I started struggling the same as the other kids who were not serious in school. So it became a problem to me, and I had to think of different ways of how I can create a change in my community and create people who are very different. Kano Africa, as of today, is being used in partnership with UNICEF in refugee camps in Uganda and some rural areas in Kenya and Rwanda, with over 15,000 children learning how to read and write, and also getting brain-stimulating activities that will enable them earn higher in wages in their future when they're adults, but also learn better in terms of skill acquisition. All right, so I would like to use my remaining few minutes, if Nazreen will allow, to just summarize. So for me, in this talk, I really want to emphasize on just 2 issues. Number 1 is brain-stimulating activities. Neuroscience shows that brain stimulation is time-bound. This is something that cannot occur beyond the age of 8. It is between 1 to 8. So if children in Africa do not encounter brain-stimulating activities, then Africa is doomed, and we are not going to be able to look beyond this servitude in education. So brain-stimulating activities are a must for all African children. Number 2, I feel like early literacy activities, because science has shown that literacy is the foundation of all learning. I mean, if you are not literate, then any form of skill acquisition, learning of any kind is going to be hindered, and it's not going to be very successful. So early literacy activities is very important if we are to look beyond servitude and also liberate access to our education. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to stop here because of time and also because of the conditions I'm in right now. So Nazarene, over to you. I don't know whether my time still allows, but I feel like
Alfred,
I've done
you
my
have
15 minutes. Thank you.
You have 3 more minutes, Alfred. So if you're if you're okay and you have a quiet space around you, please continue. I will bring in the rest of our panelists to offer feedback in the next 3 to 4 minutes.
Okay, that's nice. Okay, sure. Let me just tell you just continuation with that story. So sometime I struggle. Sometime back I find myself struggling, like I'd said, and this struggle. And recently I was on Neil, and I was at the farm. I wish I was still there, and I show you where by my farm. This is a family farm. There was a road going to a certain school within the village. I used to see very enthusiastic children going every day with all their energy, and my heart was broken because I knew they were just going to end up like me. So I started to think of how can I make these kids turn out differently from me? And boom, that's how the kind of idea starts to come up. So I started going back to town, to the urban areas, and trying to look for materials and come back here. Kano was more of a rudimentary method. But then now we have technology. I had to meet up with other co-founders, and we're like, okay, how do you digitize this? How do we make it an offline app so that people have the need for internet, you know? So we got into partnerships with, luckily enough, the government came on board, UNICEF came on board, Aga Khan came on board, and that's how we're using this thing today. So we started up with a secondary school solution, dropped to primary, but of course, research showed us that we need to stop solving symptoms of African problems. We need to start solving the real causes. So we had to drop down to early childhood education, look for early literacy among African children, look for foster for brain stimulating activities among African children, and then African youth will earn better and learn better as adults. Thank you.
Alfred, are you wrapped up? I missed you there for a moment because I think my network dropped for some reason.
I just said thank you. I just closed. I don't know if you are hearing me.
No, I can hear you now. And apologies for that. My network dropped this time, so I'm so sorry. Thank you for that presentation. And despite the challenging environment you have there now, being on the move, you delivered well enough. So I appreciate that. Thank you very much for that. Now we go to our panelists. You're welcome, Alfred. We go to our panelists. I'm just doing a quick time check with our team on the rest of the program for this evening. Afternoon, evening, morning, depending on where you are. We are at 6 p.m. South African time. I would love to know where you are now in the world. Just drop it in the comments section, what time you're at, just so we can get a quick gauge of who's on the call, what you're probably doing. Did you have breakfast? We're about to go have supper here shortly after this. But before we do, we still have an hour left in this dialogue, which is in the inaugural series around the Afrocentric systems change dialogue series. And we're talking about leadership. Leadership. That is at the core of what we want to understand in the context of an Afrocentric approach. I see Alfred has his hand up.
Yeah.
Alfred, go.
Thank you so much. I've just had my name. I don't know what's wrong, but I need to go to the check-in table and see. So if you can kindly allow me to step away for a bit, I'll be pleased.
Please go and check it out, and good luck with that. And join us when you are ready again. We'll be glad to have you back.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So Alfred's just going to be leaving us for a moment. I want to center the conversation with our remaining valued panelists, Kizito, Dr. Sensetsa, and Nadisa. Now, I want some feedback, but I am aware that the last person we have for presentation is Dr. Sensetsa. So why don't we do this? We jump into presentation with Dr. Sensetsa. We come back to Nidisa and Kizito for some final comments on both presentations, and then we kick off. How does it sound to you guys? I'm getting some nods and some thumbs up and some all-round good vibes. Dr. Sensetsa, please take us through your presentation. You have 15 minutes. We've gone through it. You are talking to us about our values, embedding African principles and value systems in our leadership journey. Please take us through your story.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Nazreen. Thank you, everybody, for being part of this conversation that will help us move in a certain direction that hopefully will grow us as a community, as a people, not only for us to continue to share our gifts and talents with the rest of the world, but also to empower ourselves to realize that in each one of us, there's a leader. I believe that we are all leaders, but we have been made to believe that we cannot lead, that we cannot create. I agree, just to make a point, with what Alfred said about our education system. The education that we inherited was meant to make us into servants. It's about time we realize that the brain drain to the Western world of African professionals, African scholars, is to come and serve the master here at home, in the master's home. We need to change the education to actually serve ourselves and to grow ourselves. That was just a comment that I had to make because Alfred talked about education. I believe that systems change is about advancing equity and dignity by shifting the conditions within the ecosystem to make it less toxic. Edisa talked about toxicity quite a bit. We have to understand what is toxic within the system and identify what it is from our culture, from our Afrocentric ways of being and ways of knowing that can actually make a shift in the conditions that perpetuate this toxicity, so that we, in the ways that we work with one another, we can actually elevate and amplify equity and dignity. We are a people that believe in one another. I personally believe that what I was taught as a child about Ubuntu, about Boto, is what has made me who I am. I stand on the shoulders of giants who taught me. I remember my aunt, when she passed away, Dr. Ellen Kuzuayo, my mom's sister, said we used to talk and she would call me from Canada and say, no, that's how she called me. No, when you hear that your aunt is gone, come back here to South Africa and bury me. And I made sure that when she passed, I came to Soweto and to bury my wonderful aunt. She left me with 3 learnings. She said, know yourself and identify yourself properly. Never, ever carry a grudge, and serve. Those are 3 things that my auntie left me with, to remember that I am part of a larger community. I need to serve. And I should never carry grudges, because grudges are what actually creates diseases within ourselves. It's better to understand what the cause of that grudge is and to start working through that history of that, whatever the cause is, uproot it, unpack it, and see whether you can co-create something different. with the people that are around you. So coming to what I wanted to share about our value system, I know throughout the conversation, we've actually highlighted some of the values that are Afrocentric, like collectivism and working together and promoting one another. I wanted us to realize that we have great talent, we have great gifts in the way we have always lived in terms of how we value relations. Nowadays in the West, people are now realizing that relations are very important. They are a source of trust, and relationship and community building are a source of social capital, are a source of social solidarity, and it helps people to develop. That is something that we've always known. It's nothing new to any one of us. And we know that if we build strong relationships amongst ourselves and we create a space where we can actually help one another, nobody will be left behind. So the value of the relationships, first of all, know your identity so that you can know your history, your lineage, because when you know your identity, you know your lineage, you tend to learn from your own history and then bring that history, that knowledge to the relationship, to educate, to help share the gifts that you have from what you've been gifted in your ways of knowing to the table so that we can move ourselves together. When we bring our minds together, we can co-create something different, which is what we are doing here together right now. Hopefully with this, we are able to come up with different mindsets that if we continue the conversation, then we'll be able to co-create even something bigger for ourselves as we start tapping into each other's gifts and knowledge to co-create this wonderful thing that will bring us dignity and equity for all of us. We need to understand, first of all, to study and re-examine what our value systems have been and what the essence of those values is. If we hold certain values that perhaps do not work for the empowerment of our people, then we can change the ways we approach those values. I'm thinking about values like accountability. Within a collective, who are we accountable to? I believe in being accountable to being accountable at the local and at the collective level. So we need to be accountable to the individual so that we know that the person is uplifted if they are down, but we also need to be accountable to the collective so that we all move together to a better place. So how do we take our relational values and our accountability to be able to move us together so that we don't leave anyone behind? I know that Kizito was giving an example of how his father would go into, would be called to come and help. He was no doctor, he was a judge, but he stepped into those spaces where people could depend on him because he was willing to share his knowledge, his lived experience. And by the way, knowing is not just book knowledge. Our lived experience gives us skills that enable us to be able to take action. So lived experience, book knowledge leads sometimes to servitude. And we should go beyond that. we should remember that our ancestors, some of them never read or wrote, but they had skills of war, they had skills of leadership, they had skills and creativity to create. I read the story of Mapungubwe. I remember when I was little, that wasn't taught in history, some of the things that, our ancestors did, smelting metals from the ores. That was skilled knowledge. It's about going back and recognizing that we've had those skills before. How do we come back and relearn some of those skills, some of the knowledge that our ancestors had, and value them and realize that it's not just because the West brought the blast furnace that this is the only way to do things. When I was teaching chemistry a long time ago, that's eons ago, I used to teach the blast furnace, and my students had to write exams that were from the UK and all of that. And I used to find that this is ridiculous. We don't have blast furnaces. What is the importance of this for my children? So I started teaching the science that I taught from my background to teach the kids to connect with science, because that's how I learned to love science. I had seen what my mother did. And when I got to high school, I started realizing that, some of the things that my mom uses at home, either at the farm and this, they're here in the lab. The lab only just gave me the language to be able to connect my lived experience with the modern science. So I could actually talk about what my mother does at home, what we do at home, using the language of science. But it doesn't mean that I totally discarded what we did at home or I saw it as inferior. So all I'm trying to say is there's a lot that we can learn from who we are, from how we've lived our lives as Afrocentric people. What are some of the values that have brought us to where we are? What are some of the good elements that we can distill from those practices and values that can actually enrich ourselves as we want to move ourselves forward together? It's not just individualism that we want. We don't want to look at ourselves as individuals. We want to work with the collective to move us together to a better place. So in a nutshell, we have the history of social relations that gives us that social capital to start nurturing that and building it so we don't lose it. I know that slowly we are becoming a little bit more individualistic because of what we learned from the West, but that is not serving us well as a people. We need to start talking about the collective more and more and realizing that there's power in centering the collective as well, because the collective will take care of the individual if we look at the essence of the Ubuntu philosophy to inform us.
Individualism, Dr. Sensatsa, versus the collective approach to caring and nurturing.
Yes.
You are reminding me, before I go into what would be 5 minutes left in this entire village conversation, around the element of care. And what does that mean? The sense of care, which has been explored, especially in the tech space, to talk around tech for good and all of the things for good, no matter what space you work in. But if you just take the word care and you understand whether people really have it at the core to care for other people, no matter the situation, it brings light to so many of the themes that all of you have referred to in your presentations. And I thank you for that valuable insight. It was wonderful to hear from you. I want to get a sense from the rest of the panelists We have 5 minutes left in this session. I know it's a hard thing to hear you have 5 minutes left, but it's the only way we keep a good program running. A short, sharp, and a tight ship, and you get good conversation. So Kizito, we'll start with you. 30 seconds of your feedback on insight into Dr. Sensatsa's invaluable insights.
So 10 seconds, I don't think I can match that, but what I'm going to
30 seconds. I'm going to be generous.
Okay. So, and I'll start with what Alfred shared in terms of the applied knowledge, and this is really something that we have to remember, that until you apply your learning, you don't have knowledge. So you like at that point of, okay, now I'm applying what I've learned, now you have knowledge. And the other piece that I loved from what he shared is going back to understanding what education actually means. You know, if you go back to the root of the word education, educare, which means drawing out what's from within, how many of us in the systems, in the education systems that we've gone through, how many of us have actually gotten that kind of education where the teacher is trying to get that thing that is uniquely you to be brought into the world? And I think that's the system that we're trying to bring back.
Kizito, are you saying then, to tie it back to the main theme of this session, which is about leadership, the Afrocentric systems change, that when we learn as Africans, you just mentioned that the root word for education means to draw out from someone. Are we drawing out based on existing teachings, drawing out to accept existing teachings versus drawing out to inspire wisdom? And I think that's something that I'm hearing you say, because as Africans, we want to celebrate our wisdom that we have. We want it to be really relevant as a Eurocentric approach from what you have mentioned before. Is that what you are saying?
I'm saying that we need to re-examine our education system and go back to what Alfred is saying, which is when we are teaching our youngs, we should, yes, there is a piece for training, which is what we have now, but there is also the piece of inspiring that thing that we all came here to do. As the Dr. Sensatsa mentioned, the idea of all of us are leaders, but until you discover your purpose in this world, it's really tough to lead, because you can't lead others if you don't even know where yourself is heading. And to know that is to understand your identity, to understand where you are in the world, and to find your place in the collectivism. So maybe to touch to what she shared as well, is the idea of once you know who you are, automatically you know your place in the collective. And it's through that then you can serve. I think sometimes we think, people go through the education systems and you think you are your title, but no, you are the work that you do. And if the work that you do is not serving the community, the collective, you're actually a cancer to society. And I think the African approach, which has always been, is how do we serve not just one another, but how do we lay the ground for the future generation through that educare? How do we bring the uniqueness of each individual to serve the collective? And because of the current education system, we don't have that option, because we are all going through training and not so much the drawing out of the unique talent and skill that each of us come to the world to serve.
An inspired, purpose-driven leadership. That's what I take away from what you have said. And thank you so much for that, Kizito. To wrap up this incredibly interesting session, which I wish we had more time for, but unfortunately we don't. Adisa, takeaways from you to close the session, please.
Thank you very much. I think from I also picked up on this comment around the education system wasn't designed for the African child, but was designed to generate servants, as it were. And it really speaks to that piece about systems being built around values, being built around beliefs, ideologies, knowledge systems, where that value in that instance is that or the belief that was at the heart of that colonial education system was that Africans could only grow up to be labor, right? And then all of these, kind of systems, legislation, laws, where people can live, what work they can do, all of these very real things then hold up, then become the system that we have to slowly dismantle. So that was really powerful for me. And around Dr. Bilane's piece, also a lot of pieces of resonance. But but one that I will speak to is the one around, we need to talk about the collective more and more. That really resonated with me. And Dr. Bilani said we need to center the collective. And what that brings to me, and at the risk of again sounding too generalist, it just proves to me that systems thinking is inherently Afrocentric, insofar as it centers the collective wisdom. So yeah, those are my thoughts around that. Thank you so much.
I appreciate you keeping that quite succinct for us to be able to wrap up what has been such a fantastic session with really great colleagues who I now consider part of my network. I hope they consider me part of that network too. I felt a good vibe and energy, and I think everyone on the call did as well. So please help me to thank Nadisa Nkonyeni, Dr. Sinsetsa Pilani, Alfred, you are on the call. I don't see him here. I'm just going to go to my notes because I remember Alfred's surname and then I don't remember it, considering my age at this point. Alfred Opeo and our good friend on the call. We've got Kizito Musabizibana. Am I right in saying that? Musazimana.
Musabimana, but you're good.
Kizito Musabimana. The most important sound to a person is the sound of their own name. So it's important I get it right. Kizito Musabimana. I thank you all very much for the valuable insights you brought to us, for the inspiration that you've planted in our hearts and our souls, and that we take away so that we are more aware. We have an awareness of how we treat one another with the care and kindness that is necessary for harmonious relations. Thank you so much for that. We will move on to the next session. So part 2 of Village Roundtable is done and dusted. And it was such a thrilling conversation, insight. Now we go to, we need to honor our elders. We have Elder Reflection System Learning Insights, reflections from the global diaspora and decade of people of African descent. Joining us, Sonwabo Stearman, Senior Manager of Advocacy, Education and Training at the Center for the Advancement on Non-Racialism and Democracy. And of course, Emmanuel Melez, Executive Director of the Network for the Advancement of Black Communities, who will do a very short 8 to 10 minute elder insight. Thank you for joining us, and please join us on stage here. Emmanuel, can you hear us? As well as Sonwabo, do we have you live? Great, please continue.
I'm happy to go after Sonwabo, as I spoke earlier. Yeah.
Not a problem. So just bringing to your attention, which is such an unfortunate thing to have a short space of time, but also you will give us a very important point so that we can remember it easily. So Nwabok, maybe we begin with you and we'll go to Aman straight after.
All right, thank you very much, colleagues. If I can just indicate that I'm audible and beautiful. All right, I was just navigating my systems in here. Thank you, colleagues, and just allow me to take a sip of water after such a stimulating conversation.
We are glad we inspired your thirst for knowledge. So bring forth your thoughts at this moment.
Thank you so much. Just an apology from Prof. Becky, who had to rush to another meeting. Unfortunately, he's unable to join us for now. So hence I am chipping in, just to provide my reflection as the leader of course. And, one of the things that, as I was listening to the story of these beautiful African minds, it's around how we are named and how we are given our names in the African culture. And I would love to get a sense, but unfortunately, and not for now, around the speakers, how they follow, their naming. I say this because I was really inspired by Nadisa, who comes from the Eastern Cape, where I come from. So I can resonate with her name, with her upbringing in Mthatha as well. So the name Ncedisa, if I were just to, try to understand and maybe just to give a meaning of the name, Ncedisa is to assist. So when we have a Ncedisa, in the community, when we have a Ncedisa that is advancing a particular narrative, really we can proudly say as an African descendants, as African people, as African children, that really, there's a powerful meaning to how we are named. So Ncedisa is really following on the footsteps of why she was named Ncedisa. So congratulations to that. And unfortunately, others I am unable to understand because, of those systems change and the ways in which system really put us on the margins in terms of understanding our linguistics dialects, in as far as Africa is concerned, because as an African man, I suppose to fully understand what Setsa means, but unfortunately, because of the colonial boundaries, the language that was taken from us, I'm unable to relate and to resonate with some of those names. And also, I think coming to what Sis Ncedisa also, talked about, I think here, true and very rich conversations and offering this afternoon, that this work can be really, really difficult and it can be very lonely. And I think when she said we need more voices for us to advance this Afrocentrism work, and I think I can relate to that very well, that I think we need a counter revolution in our own spaces, and we need to be very brave, because I think the system sometimes, especially in the spaces where we come from, I come from a space of higher education, where as leaders, we are given a very minimal space to maneuver. And it requires us to center our own activism in order to counter all those Eurocentric narratives. And I think as long as we do our bits in silos, we will not be able to counter the system, because it can be very daunting, it can be very lonely. And what the system does also, it will reward those who applaud the systems. So majority of our people, majority of our leaders are captured in that regard, because the system as it presents itself, it brings so many rewards. And unfortunately, some of us, tend to be, what's the word? We tend to be glued, and to follow those materialistic things, neglecting, the major work that needs to be done. So really, I want to applaud Ncedisa on that I want to echo the same sentiment, that we need to bring those different voices, and we need to recenter ourselves in those discourses and in those narratives. And then coming to Baba Kizito, the issue of displacement, it really saddens us when we see, the great minds that we have lost in the context of building Africa. And it's not even, in the Rwanda, even where we are in South Africa, the issue of displacement, people have been stripped of their own identities. We do not have land in the context of Africa. And I think when he said African people need to be leaders, not to be followers, and I think that was very profound for me, because in most cases, we've got people who are not willing to hold the fort because of the system's, challenges. Because as I've said, that as long as you are not brave enough to face the system, as long as you are not able to take the risk, the system will always override you and it will always dominate you. So we need those senseless leaders. We need people who are able to take the forefront, not to lead, but not to follow, But unfortunately, majority of people, especially leaders, they don't want to take the risks because there's something that they will lose if they take those risks.
So, Wallo, you raised two things. I know you want to talk to Dr. Pilane's point, and we have to jump to Aman, sadly, to round up the elder conversation. The one thing that you've said consistently in your feedback is around being brave and being bold. And that is a high sign of a deep character of a good leader. So being brave and being bold. And thank you for that feedback. I appreciate you saying that because it adds to the larger conversation of what it means to be an African, which we are known for being brave and being bold always. I thank you, Sanwabo. Thank you so much for that. Aman, let's come to you for 5 minutes of insight from an elder perspective.
Okay, thank you so much, Nazreen, and thanks all panelists. And I kind of echo some of the comments or sentiments of Snow Wabo in terms of his perspectives. I think one of the things that's so clear in this discussion for me is that through the lived experience of the panelists, the leaders themselves, we have seen in some situations adversity, turned into opportunity for change. We have seen, a reminder that frameworks are necessary, but they are not sufficient. That they are not, the end point here. That we have here an opportunity to actually create our new narrative around systems transformation. Yeah, I think we have also been reminded that when we talk about systems transformation, systems change is also a vehicle to really advance the equity. And I think there's an opportunity for us to really, as has been indicated in many ways and nuances in this conversation, that when we talk about an African perspective to systems change in the context of leadership, there are some Afro-centric values that we hold dear, including that of Ubuntu, that gave us a bit of a window to try to reimagine leadership. I do a lot of work internationally through the International Leadership Association, where continually we challenge our peers in that space, that there are African ways of knowing, African ways of leading that are different from, Eurocentric approaches. And in fact, leadership as in followership, to lead and to follow are the two sides of a coin. There's an opportunity for us to say, like, if the system cannot resolve itself through the agency of one individual, one funding, one project, one organization, what's the type of call of leadership that we need to have? When you think about, when everything's said and done, what's the call of action here? I think it's important for us to start thinking about, this concept of system leadership. If the system really throws at us all the different challenges, what is in us, in our African traditions and value systems, that we can actually start to imagine an African system leadership approach, yeah? The collective. What does that actually mean in real terms when we try to work on housing, on employment, on health, on any of those systems, yeah? I think there is a very important aspect of this conversation about the generational length that we need to continually bring to this discussion. We need to imagine that this conversation 20 years from now has to be different, because there is a planting of seeds that leads to a different type of ideation and action, whether it's programmatic, whether it's policy, whether it's legislative, whatever it is, or technological, that allows us, those that come after us, to be able to actually build on some of the bold moves that we have taken today. And so leadership is action. And I think in the context of a system, mechanics, as in housing, for example, or any of these isms, we really need to generate some new practice, some new knowledge, some new tooling that will allow us to relate to one another differently, but also to engage systems in a different way. A system perpetuates and prolongs behaviors that we are used to. There's no middle ground here. It takes two to tango. We're part of the problem or part of the solution. As leaders, we must be bold enough to be able to say, and there's so much to harvest from the wisdom or the experience of the panelists and others in this call, to be able to say, Let's actually relate differently now. Let's move from transactions, from dollars and cents. Let's talk about data, evidence. Let's talk about what it takes to scale solutions for our communities. And as was said by one of the panelists, we have so much rich experience and knowledge in the African family and in the global Black diaspora that it's time for us to actually start crafting and narrating our own stories. So thank you so much to the panelists. I'm really inspired. I've been taking a lot of notes, and I'm looking forward to the remaining segment in this conversation. Back to you, Nasreen.
Aman, I appreciate that feedback, that generous feedback. What I took away from what you said is African traditions and value systems to demonstrate current day leadership that is fit for purpose now, but also makes us interrogate African values and leadership that are centered in family, collective communities, and a sense of care and a sense of dignity for others. And so that also requires its own unraveling to understand everything from who we are in terms of, if it's not gender, it's religion, it's culture, it's a whole host of things that are challenged sometimes by a Western perspective. And that demands a deeper conversation to ensure a better output for leadership, to ensure that we also accept that we do have the right kind of leadership here. And I thank you for that. Thank you so much, Aman. I quickly want to go to Anand Lololi's comment here in the comment section before we go to the breakaway sessions. History has covered the tracks of colonization and white supremacy well. Thank you for your comments on Wabo and on our names and their meaning as a descendant of the reality of the transatlantic slave trade. We often take the present system of sovereign states for granted and believe that its development was a normal course of human development. Now that dramatic changes within and between states and people's histories and experiences are taking place, it is appropriate to rethink our explanations of the origins of our state system, analyze the forces that shaped it, and reflect on the possibility of its demise. Kizito, brother Sonwabo, the name Kizito is of African origin and means gift from God. Destiny, child, pride of God. It's also a Swahili word that means heavy. Mind you, I'm a light brother, 140 pounds. Thank you, Kizito. I appreciate you sharing that information, although it might go under the Privacy Protection of Privacy Act if there are any AI data collection people on this call. Thank you to my brother for adding to my African vocabulary. Really appreciated. You are indeed a gift from God and with a heavy soul. And you continue the conversation there. I will not read that last comment, so you will forgive me. We must go to the breakout rooms. Thanks, everybody, for helping us craft the second part, which was the Village Roundtable. Now we move into the third part. From it was Village Roundtable, Elder Insights. We go into the breakaway sessions. Quickly, I'm going to go and look at who's in what room. I think you will be allocated to a particular room. Alan Busak, you are in room 1, Sonwabo, room 2, and Neil in room 3. You will have 10 to 15 minutes for discussion. You will come back into the main room for closing remarks and our goodbyes. All right, enjoy, everyone. Remember, there's a 10-second delay when you get sent to your rooms, so don't freak out. Just wait there. They'll let you in and let you back out, and we'll see you back in the plenary. Thanks, everyone. we were just having a bit of a laugh there as Neil asked me, would you like to say anything? And I said, yeah, the timer came on. We need to get out of the breakout room. And we got out of the breakout room.
Yeah,
it's like the timekeeping is
violently exterminated the conversation.
Yes, 100%. How dare Zoom do this to us? But it did. There's nothing we can do. Thank you, everyone, for the breakout rooms. It was fantastic. What, Neil? About 10 to 12 minutes of interesting conversation. The room that I was in was room 2. And I heard a softness from people. I heard a determination from people. I heard a firmness about what we are doing. But overall, I heard a sense of delight and joy at what we are doing. And this is why you are here. So thank you so much. Now we go to reflections and feedback and closing, if I'm correct in saying. And to help me do that, the very gentlemen who have put these together, I won't give them an introduction. They have short time. Alan Basak and Neil Camphor. Take it away.
Thank you so much. I would love to take credit for all of this, myself and Neil, Nazarene. Thank you so much, but I can't. We've spoken at length about the importance of collective approaches and the importance of what we speak about using the wisdom of the village. This is about, I don't know, 8 months in the work, and it starts by being allowed the space to be able to explore. We ask ourselves the question that NABC has a systems transformation. At the core of systems transformation, we believe, is learning. And so we are always continuously trying to learn. We are students of systems change or systems transformation. So the question came up, is like, given what we've said about the wonderful things and the bodies of work that has been written and documented about systems change, and recognizing that it's predominantly from the global north and Eurocentric in nature, if we had to look at it through an Afrocentric lens, considering African principles, African value systems, would it look different? What we hear today is that lens and that perspective is very much needed. In fact, it's even gone deeper to say that at the very essence of Afrocentricity is systems change. But when you look at all these values and principles, they are already embedded within what has been written before. But are we applying it? More importantly, is it being recognized? I'm proud to sit here, as an African, as a person of African descent, and being able to play a small role of bringing forth the knowledge and the value and the beauty that our continent has to offer to add to global conversations. We had a wonderful short session now, and sometimes I feel if you give people shorter time, they will speak more than if you give them a longer time. So I think it was very powerful what came out. What came out is that, look, can we have more of these forums so that we can not only talk about this, but we can action it, so that we can come up with joint initiatives. And I say it tongue in cheek, and the team that has been working hard to put this together, they will know that we always say that if we have these dialogues as a standalone, it may not yield much. We will have wonderful conversations, we'll have build wonderful networks, but there needs to be a step after this. And we're very much open to what emerges from this. So in the future, we are hoping that this is the foundation for deeper conversations, for further engagement, for possible long-term initiatives. A lot of work has been said around the need for the education system to change. The thoughts around leadership is that we have to be honest that the challenges that we face is beyond the type of leadership that we have today. We need a different type of leadership. And sometimes practicing this leadership, systemic leadership, system leadership, however you want to call it, requires us to be bold. Being bold sometimes means that we will not be popular. It means we will take blows. It means it will come up against resistance. But if we are convicted by this path, if we are convicted that if we want to see real change, then we have to be bold enough, and we cannot do it alone. Therefore, we need discussions, we need dialogues, we need practice, we need to band together to be able to tackle some of our deepest challenges. I have a list of people I would like to thank, or that we would like to thank. And I think firstly, Liz Forsberg is not in the room at the moment. She had to leave, and she sends apologies. But when we're talking about partners, especially those that come on board to say, hey, we see value in this work, we would like to provide resources towards this. We speak sometimes about transactional versus transformational relationships. And our third dialogue will speak exactly to that. We're happy to have a partner that wants to come on board because they see value in this work. They see the work, the potential that this work has. And, you know, it's not about funding activities or funding little projects, which is important, but it's about investing in relationships and investing in collaboratives. And I think this is very much the perspective of the Ontario Trillion Foundation. So in her absence, thanks very much to her and the team over there as well. Our speakers, Emmanuel Mellis, who's I have the honor of being our executive director at NABC. I think that you were referred to as Sir Aman by Nazreen earlier, if I remember correctly. I'm not sure where in this process you got knighted, but it couldn't have happened to a more humble and wonderful person. So we'll give you the kudos for you. We'll have the ceremony when we're back together to ensure that your knighthood is completed. Professor Beke in his absence, our institutional partner within this, thank you so much. Nkladise, our road has somehow come to this from our time in South Africa, and it's a pleasure for you to be on board. Dr. Pilani, we will not go into the way that we met recently, but I'm honored to have you on this panel and to share your wonderful wisdom and your rich value with the audience. Alfred, thank you so much for making your way in transit, exciting initiatives that you have. We can already see lots of connecting points. My dear brother, who I have lots of admiration for and respect for, Kizito. We spoke about names being important. For the first 6 months, I knew Kizito. I spelled his name incorrectly, and he was kind enough to not tell me until 6 months. And now I know our names are very important, especially in African culture. So thank you for the panel and for your valuable stories and insights. Our facilitator, Nazreen, beautiful way that you have facilitated this discussion. We look forward to further discussions as well. And then also to the team working very hard behind the scenes from CANRAD, Concept Africa, Chengetai, Marco, all the rest, Paul, Sarah as well, Jonathan as well, and the NABC team who has put tremendous amount of effort into this. It is not the last conversation that we will have. We have a further 2 dialogues coming up in June. We're looking at youth agency as a key ingredient for systems change and systems transformation. And then in July, we will have the final dialogue, which would be evaluating our relationships that we have with philanthropic foundations and the government sector, looking at transactional versus transformational relationships. So the biggest thanks goes for last is to the participant that took their time. I've heard of folks that have been taking calls while they're having this in their 9 to 5. So thank you so much for the time you've put aside. Look out for more notifications coming. Look out for more feedback stemming from this. Very blessed and privileged to be a part of this, and look forward to further beautiful discussions and even longer term relationships. Neil, I'm going to hand over to you now. Good sir.
Hey, Alan, I don't know when I was knighted, so so I will accept that because I know it doesn't come often. So thank you. Aman, you and I are in the same WhatsApp group when it comes to this honorifics. Thank you for everybody for your participation. I'm not going to say too much other than thank you for every engagement that we've had with the speakers, with the people that co-created this concept. We know it's risky. We know online is not always safe, but we're creating a space for engagement. I'm actually sitting here next to my 17-year-old son and trying to give him a peek into what his future is likely to be in the engagement. And you can say hello to, just everybody. I'm just hello. So we can't talk about the future without involving the youth, and I think that that's the segue for next year, for next dialogue in June, where we place this particular conversation at the center of that activation. And just as a parting shot, Nazreen, for me, the key thing from the last conversation was the call, the clarion call for more face-to-face, more learning exchanges, and to make sure that we take practical actions from these dialogues. So that next year, when we engage each other, we can see significant movement in how we experience the system rather than trying to just fix the system. we make it better for ourselves. We place our own agendas at the center of this movement, and part of that is collaboration and partnership. So thank you for everyone for the comments on Facebook, on YouTube, and in the chat rooms. We really appreciate this, and we look forward to hearing from all of you in the post-event feedback form that you'll probably get in a day's time or so. So please feel free to reach out to us, to the guys at CANRAD. Thank you to all the technical support. Mpo, that was on the back end, Marco on the live stream, and the technical team that puts the event together. So it's an honor to work with you. And for the late nights, Alan, for the early mornings for Alan, for me it's the late nights. But we all appreciate all the efforts that's being made. Our deepest appreciation. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Nazreen, for doing an excellent job, my dear.
It's my pleasure. Very thrilled that we're wrapping up. Comments in the section. I'm not sure what else the gentleman would like to say or add. Had some good feedback here. You know what to do. Drop a comment. Get in touch with either Alan or Neil. I won't be monitoring your time on writing that email, but you can take your time and write that email or WhatsApp message, I promise. But definitely a next session. Neil, would you remind us of the next, the date? Is it confirmed for the next dialogue?
Yeah, the date is the 12th of June. That is the youth dialogue, Youth at the Center of Systems Change. And the following one is the 17th of July. As Alan said, the evaluation of the relationship with philanthropy and government in systems transformation work.
Wonderful. We'll ensure next time there's more time for breakout sessions. That's what I heard from one of the rooms, breakout rooms. We'll have more time for the chats and also more time for feedback from the breakout rooms, which I think will be great. You want to hear what other people thought about what you are also thinking about, because we are actually all thinking about the same thing, right? And have the same fears and thoughts. Thank you all very much for attending. If I can ask permission to close the session, it has been a wonderful inaugural dialogue of Afrocentric approach systems transformation, a collaborative dialogue series. Look out for more information on the next dialogue coming up, and we wish you well for the rest of your day ahead. Good night.
Thanks,
thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you.
You.